Did I say incredible? I meant terrifying. Soul-shattering, in fact. But still, I wouldn't have traded it for anything, no. Not anything. I mean, in fact, I'm not saying screw the good guys or anything. It's just, I can't really care anymore. I mean, I really can't. That was all part of the deal, you know that? Shoes and broom handles, 100-pound weights. Real slapstick, Well, okay. Let me give you a word of advice, kid. You can puncture this real easy. You know what you can puncture it with? An ice pick, that's right. Okay. That's why you should never clean the frost out of your freezer with an ice pick. Okay, so what do these repairmen do? They put the words refrigerator repair on the worst thing to work on a refrigerator with. They give it out to the dumb shits of the world. And so then someone's just punctured their refrigerator with the tool that... Okay. Oh, it's just such a dumb shit, I didn't even realize I'd punctured a tube. I was just trying to pry loose some tater tots. The specifics really don't matter. What you gotta understand here is that there was cause and effect between... The specifics don't really matter. Just understand that there was cause and effect between my blind need for tater tots and my brother burning to death in his sleep. So anyways, I was going through all of the usual, emotional stuff that the normal person tends towards when they blame themselves for the death of a loved one. I end up on this camping trip with this really inspirational friend of mine named Todd Gleehausen. Take breaks only to nourish himself off brown rice and mung while he dragged them up. He loved interventions and counseling sessions and showing people how to love life and love themselves when things look their bleakest. So in ways, when others might have shied away when they saw me in the depths of depression, you and me need to go camping. We started out at 6 in the morning and we hiked straight in until sun was setting. We started at 6 in the morning and hiked straight in until the sun was setting before we pitched camp. That night okay. In the morning, Todd made us a breakfast of buckwheat pancakes with tiramine syrup and scrambled flax gluten. Eat food without, filmy quality that the depression puts on things. So anything, I don't know. And we finished, and Todd said we should pack up and head in further, maybe get some climbing in. And that's when we saw the bird. It wasn't really just the bird itself that drew our attention. It was the entire setting that it was part of. And it was sitting on top of a large rock. I don't know, it was framed in like green foliage up and down. It was like it was insisting that someone take notice of this photo op it was creating. So that's pretty much what we did. I mean, Todd goes back and he grabs the camera out of the tent. I just sort of backed off slowly so that he could get a clear shot. Todd raised up the camera and really slowly just pushed the button. And like click. The bird, I don't know, it was like the camera made a loud enough click that any wild animal should have bolted or flinched or something, but this bird just kept up with this little song. And that's kind of when I realized that the song and the movements, they were repeating. You see, the bird, it had a wire come out of its feathers. And this wire went down its leg and off behind the rock it was sitting on. From where we had been... Now, I mean, of course, you can't believe what you're looking at. It wasn't even a very realistic looking... The bird wasn't real. I mean, it wasn't even a very realistic looking thing from any angle other than the one that we'd been at first.
Push, hon, you can do it. You're doing great. She was doing better than I was, but the nurses kept encouraging me to encourage her. We've been in the hospital for 3 days now. I mean, maybe 4, and the doctors wouldn't tell us what the complications were. Something was wrong. They either weren't sure or they just wouldn't tell us, and I was starting to wonder which was better. Just get the fucking baby out of me already, Katie screamed. Katie never swore. I feel like I'm trying to shove out a fucking bucket of bricks. That stuck out in my mind, that exact quote. It's a boy. I wasn't sure how to take that. I wanted a boy. We both wanted a boy, but it was announced as more of a question than I thought it should be. We were first-time parents, so I thought maybe that was just how doctors announced it. Or at least this doctor. Maybe he didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, if we were hoping for a girl. Also, this wasn't our normal doctor. Dr. Peters was in the hospital himself, being treated for something. Dr. New Guy maybe didn't know if we already knew the sex, or maybe we're waiting for it to be a surprise. Still, I considered all these things, but the hesitation worried me. "He's beautiful," my wife exclaimed when New Guy finally held up our new baby boy. I kind of thought it was a joke. We had looked at the sonogram but asked not to be told the sex, or to have anything pointed out. When you don't know what you're looking for, it really isn't that obvious. Also, we were on something of the budget plan. We got all the third-rate rooms, equipment. Our sonogram resembled an old Atari more than state-of-the-art medical science. This was what I contributed the blockiness of our baby to. I had thought it was kind of fun that our baby seemed to resemble Mario circa 1984. New Guy handed our new baby boy, Thomas, to Katie, and she rocked him in her arms, and I could see the tears of joy taking the place of those of pain. I wanted to share in her excitement, and I did, but I wasn't sure what to think. I mean, the best I could tell, Thomas was made of Legos. He resembled a newborn baby in every fashion, but at the same time was a little different. His body was the colors it should be, but in solid colors. Everywhere his skin tone changed, it did so with the next piece. And he was even held together by those little round nubs that stick out of the blockiness. I could see them on his little baby limbs, and each stub had a little Lego printed on it. But I wasn't burdened so much with the question of how it had been possible as much as how it would be possible. How would he grow? How would he be able to fit in with the other kids at school? How would he eat? And how would his preferences lean? How would he crap? But I shoved all those questions aside, at least until we got Thomas home, and went and hugged beautiful Katie and said, "He's beautiful." Thomas grew up surprisingly normal. I mean, we thought it was normal anyway. You adapt. Having nothing to compare it to, we thought it was cute when he would take his legs apart. He would try to put it back together, but he didn't have the cognitive skills for that yet. He usually just ended up chewing on his pieces until we would take them away from him and put him back together. I was curious what would happen if he accidentally swallowed a piece of his own foot, but Katie didn't share my curiosity. "That isn't funny," she'd tell me. I had so many questions about our son's body, and some stuck out more than others. He was completely hairless when he was born and remained so for some time. When he did finally start to grow hair, it happened all at once instead of gradually. One morning he woke up with a full head of hair, but it was one solid piece, like he had found it in the middle of the night in the corner of the crib and attached it to his head. Then one day I noticed he had eyebrows, but they appeared to just be drawn on. I couldn't remember how long they'd been there. Had it been a matter of weeks, or had they just appeared?
Okay, the one that happened before. Open your mouth and the smoke alarm cries wolf. Pick up the receiver. The hollow vowel tone... Jesus.
Todd was moving where I was, and apparently he'd noticed the wire too because his jaw had just gone completely slack and his eyes were bulging. I reached forward to examine the fake bird, and those fake marble, whatever. So there I am, sprawled out on a pile of fake rock and fake bird, and I notice that the grass under me isn't right either. Now that the rock was out of the way, I could see that the wire from this little fake bird, it went into the grass, and I dug in there, and I find a speaker. So Todd backs up, leans against this tree, and branch breaks in half. Fucking thing's styrofoam. You know, it's got wires sticking out for twigs. It's got little cloth swatches for leaves, but it doesn't even look real. That's the thing about all of this, is when you really looked at it, when you took it from any other angle than where you started, it was insulting how fake it was. That's the thing. So anyways, pretty much things kept up like that for a while. We'd examine something, should have been a product of nature, and we find out it was barely convincing fraud. I mean, it was only believable from a certain angle or a certain level of attention paid to it, you know? Some of the sticks on the ground, they'd just be styrofoam. You could pass over them, just kind of give a glance and think stick. And then others you could collect for firewood, and you could burn them. You could have a campfire, but if you broke them apart, if you really examined them, you'd find out that they were just newspaper pressed together, and then, you know, kind of with Then, you know, there were animatronic squirrels, but when you watched them frolicking around in the crepe paper leaves, it was too stiff when you paid attention to it, you know? So I'm kneeling over this arrangement of plastic mushrooms when from behind me I hear this sound coming out of Todd. Now this was startling to me. This was really startling because I noticed up until this point, Todd had been totally silent. Kind of like, you know, wouldn't really be funny to see a guy get hit in the face with a sledgehammer or to see a coyote fall off a cliff. What? I've never been in a situation like this. That was all I could think. I just kept backing away. I just walked backwards until Todd was just lost in the styrofoam trees. Never saw him again. And after that, I just kept wandering around discovering how everything was fake. Or three-colored money. You just, over and over, you gotta find out how it's done. And so you just keep getting ripped off. Then by the time the curiosity wore off, I was just really too used to it to go nuts. So at that point, I pretty much just started getting pissed. See, so this investigation of my surroundings, I pretty much turned into a thrashing. I started ripping apart the miles of gaffing tape just behind everything. I even tried digging. I went through layers of... I quit at one point in a hole that was waist deep. It didn't really feel right either. It was, I don't know, it was like tiny BBs. I don't know, it was something you put in a fish tank to look like dirt. See, when I was digging through the ground, at one point I just dug into the sod, and I reached in and I grabbed onto something that was just, and both ends just disappeared into the ground in opposite directions. And so I pulled more, and I ripping the cable up through this artificial sod and exposed about 10 feet of it. You know, I needed some sort of goal orientation to take my mind off the whole thing. So I just, when you're in real woods, you're supposed to follow the stream until you. So I charged on like a farmer. I was tilling this fake ground. I just stretched out.
Okay. The one that happened before that. Open your mouth and the smoke alarm cries wolf. Pick up the receiver. The hollow vowel of dial tone swells. Then the voice. Enter the first 4 digits of your. Then, I'm sorry, that is an invalid. So, consider instead the statement in front of you. Energy factor, pressure factor. For a moment, consider therms. That day you will search the cushions for change and find instead the string that tethers your soul to your body, taut but anchored there. The vacuum will growl and suck its cord, disabled by self-propulsion. It will become unnaturally heavy in your hands. Fidget with the scars on your fingers, shiny as permanent rings, perfidious as a reedless clarinet. Recall grease-marked paper plates at the last picnic of your life. Your mother combing the snarls from your hair, you stuffing kittens in a pillowcase, saying, "It's okay, I'm just packing up." Rub your own belly for luck. And the scuttle of inanimates, spirits roaming in and out of rooms without their bodies, murmuring, "Hold," and your call will be answered in the order it was received, which is only fair, after all. So calm the smoke alarm with a dish rag. Unplug the vacuum so it can rest. Put your nose in the corner and count high enough for it to end. The debris, all the dog-eared evidence of that day and the last day and the one that happened before that.
When Katie went back to work, we searched around and found a daycare for Thomas. Catherine came highly recommended and was amazingly understanding. She did everything she could to help Thomas feel comfortable. The first 2 weeks, she would relay to Katie how he kept to himself and played with the toy trucks, but behaved wonderfully. After a couple of weeks, he started to play with the other kids, and another month later, he was the most popular there. They would all make games out of taking his legs and arms apart and putting him back together. On a couple of occasions, he would have a random red or green piece in the middle of one of his legs. We would have to dig through the Lego box with Catherine and find his missing piece to replace it. By the time Thomas was ready for kindergarten, many of our fears had been relaxed. He had gotten along well with all the other kids in daycare. My wife and I constantly read, doing everything we could as first-time parents. We read Dr. Spock. We read the entire What to Expect When series. We bought every new Lego series, both for Thomas to play with and to read up on all the directions. We just wanted to cover our bases. But still, we had our worries that first day of class. All the other kids will pick on him. I know it. I knew we shouldn't have left him. Katie was sobbing into the phone. It was the first day of kindergarten. We'd met with both the principal and the kindergarten teacher on a couple of occasions 2 weeks before class had started. We felt it best to let them know what to expect, and we wanted to feel them out, make sure everything would be okay. "I'm sure he's just fine, hon. Calm down. He'll be okay. I mean, if anything had happened, they would have called us. The other kids probably love him." I had to hide my own fears for the sake of both our nerves. I finally calmed her down enough to go back to work, but I didn't get anything done. When I picked Thomas up from school that afternoon, he had the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Mrs. Andes, his teacher, said all the kids loved him and didn't tease him at all. He spent all evening telling Katie and myself about his day over and over. This repeated for the first month or two of classes. Thomas would barely want to leave when we came in the afternoons to pick him up. All the other kids wanted to come over to play. Katie and I relished having the cool kid in class. We were so proud. "Mr. Martin, you need to come down here right away." What is it?" I asked. No one ever called me Mr. Martin. Mrs. Andes had a squeak in her voice and she wouldn't explain. "Have you called Katie yet? Is Tommy all right?" "No, her line was busy. You should get down here as soon as possible." I could hear little kids crying in the background. When I showed up at the school, there were already 2 ambulances parked outside. I had called Katie on my cell on the way. I ran into Thomas's room and most of the kids were standing in a circle around his body. A cop was questioning a couple of the kids back by Mrs. Andes' desk. Thomas had been playing with everyone, showing them how he could take himself apart and put him back together. He had rebuilt his leg on his arm. Then, apparently, he had gone too far, and with half of his body spread out around him, he began having trouble breathing. The kids tried to put him back together as quickly as possible, but it was too late. Reassembled, Mrs. Andes tried, but couldn't find a pulse. She yelled for one of the other teachers to call 911, and she took him apart and rearranged his pieces, futile attempts to revive. I broke through the circle and picked Thomas up in my arms and looked back to see Katie storming into the room. The paramedics sat around and shrugged their shoulders. We did everything we could think of. We rode with Thomas in the back of the ambulance to the hospital, And there the doctors separated him piece by piece and spread him out on a bed, but shrugged their shoulders like the paramedics before them. Still weeping, Katie prayed for it all to be over and asked if we could take him home. At home, we prayed again for his body and mixed it into the Tupperware box of Legos that Thomas kept under his bed, and I shelved him in our attic, the best burial we could imagine.
Perco's Family Dining, a forgettable roadside sarcophagus of a restaurant where all the living dead tuck packs of Benson and Hedges in their shirt pockets like pagers and slowly shrivel in their booths over marmalade toast and V8. They are the regulars in mesh baseball caps. I am the outsider. The waitresses here were carefully plucked out of 1979. They still pull on pantyhose that came from an egg, still wear polyester wool miniskirts to match the drapes, still smack gum, still sling coffee from the hip, still name their babies Gary and Don, still wing plate specials from a height of 5 feet, landing them on the bar with such a mighty smack that the yolks break and run all over my pancakes. The only thing that tells me that this is not actually 1979 is the bright, clean rectangle in the carpet near the front door. The cigarette machine stood there before it was dragged away by law. I've only just figured it out now. I remember pulling all those spring-loaded knobs like I was playing pinball while my parents paid the bill on family vacations. The government must have figured out that, given time, I would collect enough quarters in my sticky little hands, plot the opportune moment to drop them into the machine, and greet the cigarettes that came tumbling out with crippling addiction. The regulars in mesh baseball caps are still complaining about the newest smoking law. I know this because I can hear the man down the bar, complaining. He is venting his frustrations to the waitress, who has brought him a plate of eggs. He wants her sympathy. He was just about to go outside for a smoke. You can't smoke in any public place in California anymore. No restaurants, no lobbies, no bars. On his fingers, he ticks off the places a person can no longer smoke. He used the type of persuasive argument he would like to see put forth on the floor of Congress. He fancies himself a fighter for truth, justice, and the American way. Nicotine is his Jimmy Stewart. Addiction is his constituency. My eggs will be cold when I get back, he announces, standing up abruptly and fumbling with trembling fingers for the cigarettes in his shirt pocket. Just see. He begins to tap the pack against his palm and walks away, talking loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear his protest. California wants me to eat cold eggs, he says. They've got something against me eating warm eggs, and there's nothing I like better than warm eggs. Except smoking, I say. But instead of saying it, I think it, and watch him walk out the front door and light up a cigarette in the non-public front doorway. Everybody who leaves the restaurant in the next 5 minutes does so like Evel Knievel, emerging through a ring of fire, smoke trailing past their head and shoulders. As a matter of displacement or air pressure, the smoke actually rushes into the restaurant through the open door. Nothing is strange. I've been in 1,000 restaurants exactly like this one, but everyone here is a stranger. Here we are, some of us coming, some of us going. We're all on the same elevator, stuck between floors. There is a subconscious reality about these roadside restaurants in the middle of nowhere. Escape is the primary goal from the moment you arrive. This is not a destination. This is a vehicle, a vessel. Everyone is going somewhere, and to get there they have to pass through here. Pit stop, purgatory. This place is just an ashtray, a toilet, a payphone, a warm plate of food on the way to the next city. It does not have an existence of its own apart from the business of freeways. Why do the patrons come? To eventually go away. They come to go. They come so that their going can be efficient, their journey streamlined. Pull off the freeway to get back on it as soon as possible. Quickly asking for the check, always checking the watch. 50 years ago, it was different. Travel was rare. A traveler, by virtue of travel itself, carried with him stories. The traveler was welcomed for his strangeness, his circumstance, no longer. Now we are here to use each other. Use me for my money, I'll use you for a plate of warm food. Don't stay too long, don't settle in, don't talk. Okay, maybe the weather, but don't foster new relationships. Of that thinking, fast food was born, and now we are all happier. The faster you can meet a customer's needs and send them on their way, the more customers you can handle. The more you draw, the more you make. Bright colors, tasty grease, and a prefabricated trademark Disney toy for the kids that will be recalled by winter. Someday soon you will phone in your order with your credit card 10 minutes down the freeway, and as you pass by they will run out and hurl it into your open window. I remember when McDonald's kept a running total of how many hamburgers they sold. They posted the latest count every so often right below those golden arches. When I was a child, we would check the sign each time we returned to see if the tally had changed while we were away. Over so-and-so million became over so-and-so billion. Now it just reads billions and billions served. The numbers lost meaning, but they still keep the billions and billions hoisted high for all to see. Mass society has made its decision. We want Big Macs. How can we all be wrong? You might as well conform to the pattern of your peers, your associates, the family next door, the regulars in mesh baseball caps. Eat here until you lose count, the sign beckons. We are happy to lose count with you. Yes, in fact, everyone here is familiar. I come to expect these people to be here. The waitress, the family on vacation, the truck drivers, the blue-collar businessmen in wrinkled suits on their way to a convention, the day-tripping senior citizens, the regulars in mesh baseball caps, the table full of clean-shaven police officers. They are the stereotypes, and they are here. I am probably a stereotype to them, too. The loner, the stranger. In this place none of us have occupied before. We are all comfortable with everything around us. Our expectations are met. We want a place to sit, a cup of coffee, a girl in a skirt to bring us food. To the regulars, these are the girls next door. These are their daughters, the sex symbols, the Norma Jeans. I might wish on them a modest reflection of urban fashion sense or a secondary education, but it doesn't matter. They will flirt, the men will tip, and everyone will go away satisfied. A policeman enters the restaurant. He has his thumbs in his belt as he moves, a saunter swagger that says, I am a cop, I wear fingerless gloves, I am important, don't cross me. He stops at a table above a man reading a newspaper. Sir, do you own the black van outside? The officer says aloud, and with dead seriousness. The man looks up from his cup of coffee, folds down the corner of his newspaper, and stares at the officer blankly. Did you drop something? The officer repeats slowly. The officer moves one hand to his hip and fumbles to pull something from his belt. The whole restaurant freezes. One man dives for cover under a table. The man with the newspaper turns pale. The officer holds up a pager and cracks a smile. The man says sheepishly, and then all at once he realizes the seriousness was all a prank. Well, goddamn! Thank you! The man raises his voice, suddenly smiling, then laughing, then slapping his knee and dry heaving. The officer chuckles, then guffaws. His jaw bounces like it's on a spring. He holds his belly with one hand. All the policemen at the policeman table laugh. They're rolling with laughter, grabbing their sides, adding one-liners and new punchlines out of the side of their mouths. The patrons nearby join in the laughter. They look like bobbleheads. The man who dove for cover emerges and dusts himself off with an embarrassed, "You got me" grin. The waitress says something funny and everyone redoubles again with laughter. A horrible, campy moment. A silly, stupid joke. This show would get canceled after the pilot, much less one season. The jokes are bad. I was on the road looking for the essence of humanity, age-old secrets, mysteries, and longing. The God-shaped hole for the soul. The joke is on me. I pay the bill and leave. This scene will be replayed in another restaurant in another town tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, because the road is so glamorous and liberating. I've read books that tell me so. What happened? The road just killed another road trip writer from sheer boredom. No wonder Jack Kerouac was high all the time.
Everyone in costume for cocktails, half of us hating each other. Pete jokes, uses Canada as a metaphor for lack. My Canadian girlfriend, I don't have a girlfriend, the conversation we're not having about Canada. He takes the last swig and follows me home like a hot shadow. I murmur a list of sad things to help him sleep. Murphy beds, pogs, the crescent sag of a white slip, papers flying out of hands in a windy intersection, the smell of singed hair. Pete's mouth is tense. He stares down the nightlight. I dream an annotated bibliography. Then I'm in a piece of fiction, but must also write comments in the margins. It is exhausting. We sit on milk crates in the kitchen, listening to coffee percolate. Pete says he dreamed of pietistic movements, foliage on virgin gourda, slits in fine paper for photo corners, the push of feet through the real magenta of fall leaves, and beachcombing with Morca, the living flamenco legend in town.